I was once accused of being a witch and almost burned alive at the stake while hiking in the remote regions of Bulgaria. It's a true story. Back in 2016, I was part of the United States Air Force and I was employed as a staff sergeant, which is arguably the greatest rank in the entire Air Force. So at the time, I was stationed in Bulgaria on a deployment. We were guarding some aircraft. Doesn't really matter. But I'd planned on spending my off time, my very limited, very valuable off time, going off and exploring castles, trying to learn a little bit more about the culture, the history. I'm a nerd like that. Well, thanks to a couple of airmen who got drunk and decided to get into some fights the night before, all passes were canceled. No one was allowed to leave the base. No one was allowed to do anything. Well, the LT who actually gave that order had already planned on going on a hike that weekend. It was a 2-day hike. Him and another NCO were going to go. Well, I found out about this and I decided to talk my way onto the trip. And, it worked. So the game plan was to go off and find this local guy named Victor, who our LT had hired, to guide us through the mountains. We didn't know this guy, we didn't know the area, and we thought it was best, to just, try and trust the local. So we ended up meeting with him and we started our hike. Victor was a great guy. He's from the city, very modern. Well, as we hike for hours. I'm talking 12 plus hours of hiking through the mountains. And at the end of it, we're all just exhausted. We had climbed very far up, we've gone very far, and we're in the middle of nowhere, and the sun's starting to go down. So, I didn't really plan on anything, throughout this. I was kind of relying on the LT and the other NCO who had already done the legwork. Well, we finally come across this house, and Victor had paid this local house, the family there, to let us crash there for the night. The game plan was to crash at the house and then go hiking all day the following day to another pickup point where we would get in the car, take it back to our original car, and that would be the end of the trip. So we end up getting at this local's house, and they feed us food, and we're thankful for them. And finally, we're just all sitting around their picnic table, watching the sunset over the mountains. It was by far my favorite hike, the most beautiful scenery I'd ever seen. Well, I'll be honest, I have a little bit of flair for showmanship, and they had a local deck of cards. Not your standard deck of cards, just a local Bulgarian deck of cards. They were smaller, they were a little more hard to manage. We didn't understand anything that was on the cards, so we really couldn't play any games with them. So I grabbed the deck of cards and I go up to the host, which is an older gentleman, and I decide to show him a magic trick. So I do the standard, hey, pick your card, any card, and he does that. He shows it to his wife. You can tell they don't really know what's going on, but through hand gestures, I'm able to tell them what to do and where to place it. So they place it in the deck. I do my voodoo magic, and all of a sudden I go, "Is this your card?" And of course it was. And so the guy immediately starts freaking out. He starts screaming bloody murder. He puts his hand up over his wife, and they're trying to back away. And he's just pointing at me, yelling in Bulgarian. Now, there's a clear language barrier, so I have no idea what he's saying. I'm just standing there with a dumb look on my face, just holding this card out, because I have no idea what's going on. The LT has no idea what's going on. The other NCO has no idea what's going on. Well, all of a sudden, our interpreter, Victor, he comes running out of his room that he was in, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's speaking to them and everything, and the guy starts accusing me of being a witch and practicing magic because there is no way I could have pulled off this trick. Well, at that moment, his teenage son, comes out with a bat, and he's ready to fight. And so the interpreter is like, "Whoa, whoa, hold on a minute." And me and the LT and the other NCO, we're both just real confused. I mean, we're ready to fight, but at the same time, we don't want to fight. We're just like, "Whoa, hold on a second." So the interpreter ends up, talking to the guy, and he's like, "Hey, you got to show him how you did the trick." And I was like, "Yeah, of course, sure, if that's what's going to resolve this." So I walk him through how I do the trick. I show him my sleight of hand. I show the muggles where the magic is. And he finally, starts calming down. And the interpreter kind of pulls me off to the side and he goes, "Listen, man," he goes, "this isn't like where you're from. Okay, these people are remote. Like I'm talking so remote they didn't have electricity. It was very outskirts. They were using like rakes that were just made up of sticks. They didn't have modern technology. And so they were very old school in their limiting thinking." So the interpreter, Victor, he tells me, he's like, "Hey, listen, here, they follow the old ways, and if you're practicing magic, you're going to get burned alive at the stake. It's just, something that they do." And I was like, "Cool, got it." And so I didn't show him any more magic tricks that night. I ended up sleeping with one eye open, but overall the trip was an absolute blast, and it was one of my favorite memories. Well, we ended up hiking out of there the next day. We say thank you. They were still very cautious of me. We ended up hiking out of there, and we got out of there safely. So my advice is a magician never reveals their secrets unless you're about to be burned alive at the stake. Then it's A-OK with me.